Hi, welcome to Unfrazzling Your Head, mind management for school leaders. This is both a training resource and an opportunity to think about your learning community in a new way. My name's Andrew and I work at Action Your Potential. We work in 170 schools nationally. Currently, we're supporting students and parents to change their responses. Actually, to change brains, which change minds, which change worlds. And over the course of this video, there are installments. We're going to explore well-being and mind management for school leaders and use that as an opportunity to explore the power of unleashing a different way of approaching change across organisations, working with the whole community, the whole brain of the whole child for the whole day. And it's about unlocking parental partnership and student potential. So, Action Your Potential started way back in 2018 with one school. Over the course of the last 5 years, we have increasingly spread across the country. We are now up as far as Buckinghamshire, as far east as Essex, as far west as the outer reaches of Hampshire. We're in 170 schools. We've done a huge amount of work building neuro ninjas. A neuro ninja is someone that lives in their brain, understanding how it works. We are passionate about social justice and closing the gap. We have got 24 coaches in our organisation at the moment, supporting students in the evenings, supporting parents in the evenings, building neuro ninja habits to change lives. And our focus is helping schools, students and parents support the whole brain of the whole child for the whole day. So what's a neuro ninja, you ask? A neuro ninja is somebody that lives in their brain using the power of metacognition to understand the brain's output and to improve and develop in perpetuity. We can change our brains through what we do each day, which will change our mind, which will change our world. It's about maintaining insight. Insight is an accurate and deep understanding of ourselves and our motivations, our needs and our behaviours. And insight is available in a human mind the entire time. We all lose insight when stuff kicks off, but those metacognitive skills are the skills that we return to keep us going forward, to course correct. And during the course of our work across all of our schools, we're teaching 4 metacognitive neuro ninja strands. There's a well-being strand. I'm going to talk about that in a while. There's a mind management strand. There's a strand focused on learning and memory and understanding the brain's learning and memory systems. And then there's a strand focused on managing relationships and behavior, both your relationship with yourself and your own behavior and relationships with others and other people's behavior. If we're thinking about leadership, if we're thinking about you doing a very challenging job every day, we're talking about insight in a very specific way. We lose insight whenever we're engaged in something complex, demanding, or emotional. There's intuitive insight, which is the basic emotional and behavioural reactions that we give and others give, and our sense of what is about to happen in terms of someone's response or reaction, or our own response and reaction. And then there's cognitive insight, which is a much more strategic grasp of what is going on in terms of what are the most effective responses to give to achieve a particular desired outcome. And we can lose either of these for a period of time. And if we do as a leader, it generally spells disaster. We're going to give a much more reactive, much less effective response. And at the level of the child and the parent and members of staff, losses of insight cause difficulties in terms of making progress, learning and development. This stuff will absolutely change your life if you let it. It's based on neuroscience, it's based on psychology, it's incredibly impactful stuff. We are constantly getting feedback from the people that we're supporting. These might be staff in school, it might be students in school, it might be parents and carers. It absolutely changes lives because it's based on the neuroscience. And the prefrontal cortex of the human brain is shaped as much by what we do, how we're treated by those around us, how we think about ourselves, and what goals drive us forward as it is anything else. There used to be an argument in biology about whether it was nature or nurture that changed us. It's actually nature via nurture. Our daily experiences epigenetically change the shape of our brain. The prefrontal cortex is neurally plastic throughout our lives, so we are all sculpting our brain's neural architecture. Now, this is fundamentally important when it comes to thinking about our own mind management as a school leader and our own well-being. If we're thinking about well-being and mind management, if we're thinking about supporting a student to be successful at GCSE and A-level, we need to think differently about how we grow our neural architecture. We need to think about where we want our architecture to be in 5 years' time. What do we want to be doing? How do we want to be behaving? How do we want to be responding? What might that look like in 6 months' time? And then the Neuro Ninja aspect of this is doing something each day, a near goal that begins to build the architecture that creates that person that you want to be. Those changes in your neural architecture. How do we do this? We do this through graded exposure. Brain cells grow at the speed of a plant. Tiny incremental changes, an incremental change, an iterative change, an involved change, with us focused on tiny little habits to change and develop ourselves, the students in our schools, parents and carers, the entire learning community. So over the course of the rest of this video, we're going to be exploring these packets. A packet is a burst of information, and it's in a lightning bolt because that's how the brain shares information. It shares information electrically and neurochemically, and we're going to explore now understanding emergence and insight, building flexibility and bandwidth, how unmanaged stress is a barrier to growth, and how we can build resilient learning communities. Welcome back to Unfrazzling Your Head, mind management for school leaders. Let's dive in and explore understanding emergence and insight. We are a brain and a body that generates a mind, not a mind that bosses around a brain and a body. That is fundamental. That is coming at us from the depths of neuroscience. We're a brain and a body that generates a mind. We're not running the whole show from the center of our heads the entire time. We are constantly the emergent property of different circuits and networks in the brain. So, to be a neuro ninja, we need to understand that our brain generates our mind, like a projector produces an image. The brain circuits we use the most flavour our mind the most, and our brain is interested in facts, but actually is much better at generating rapid opinions and beliefs, many of which are not based on reality, much more based on our perception of reality. And those opinions and beliefs can be negative initially. They can be negative about ourselves. They can be negative about other people. And we need to understand that those opinions and beliefs, while they feel like facts in our head, are not facts. We say you're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And one of the key ideas that underpins this work, this development, this approach that changes us, is that our brain works like this. If we repeatedly practice something, our brain and body make it easier for us to do that thing, regardless of whether that thing is good for us or not. So if we practice a foreign language, you get better at a foreign language. If we practice guitar, we get better at guitar. If we practice overthinking and worrying, we get better at overthinking and worrying. If we practice short attention spans of 30 seconds on TikTok, we get a shorter attention span of 30 seconds. Our brain is made of billions of neurons, 86 billion neurons supported by 86 billion glial cells, 300 trillion available connections. If we counted every connection in the brain at the rate of 1 a second, it would take us 10 million years. And our mind emerges from our brain's operation moment to moment. We are an emergent property. Our lives, daily, are our magnum opus, our great work. Each day can be a symphony arising from a well-managed mind or a cacophony. And our mission is to support you to manage your mind so it's a symphony, and then the school can be much more harmonious. Our brain is a team of rivals brain. Different circuits evolved at different times to do different things. It does sometimes feel that there's a tug of war going in our brain between different decisions, different feelings, and that's absolutely the case. It's about the calibration of circuitry, particularly at the front of the prefrontal cortex, in terms of where the wave function of decisions goes. What we decide to do, how we perceive the world, is absolutely based on the shape of our neural architecture at that particular moment. So a balanced brain and body is one where there is mental flexibility. This arises from positive physical and mental health and carefully selected habits that support that, as well as benign and supportive psychosocial forces. Those 4 forces I mentioned earlier: the habits that we practice, the relationships with other people, our relationships with ourselves, and our goals. Poor mental health arises from a body and brain out of balance, where the orchestra of the brain isn't being effectively conducted from the top of the prefrontal cortex. We can get a cacophony and not a symphony. Think of it like this: if we've got a brain that's too rigid, a brain that isn't flexible enough to adapt and respond and cope, we might end up stuck and dysregulated. If we're in a brain that overshares information between networks and is easily disrupted, we might be distractible and dysregulated. Balance is the key. We need to work every day to achieve balance across the networks in our brain, in terms of making sure that we're giving reactive and responsiveness in equal balance. That arises from ongoing well-being behaviours and careful mind management and calibration of our response through metacognition, through balance and re-regulation. We need to model this, we need to project this, we need to show this, because from the top of our brain, as a birthright, we have got the ability to manage the rest of our brain, not control it. There's no boss circuit in the brain, but manage it. We're reaching down from our prefrontal cortex to manage and edit our responses every day. We're editing our stories that our brain tells us about ourselves, and we're supporting, as school leaders, other people on that journey. A very small baby, under 6 months old, has the palmar reflex. When you put your finger on their palm, they grip your finger. That same reflex is alive in us now as adults, but if someone put a finger on your palm, you wouldn't grab it reflexively, and that's because you suppress that reflex. Within 6 to 10 months, we learn to suppress that reflex. This circuitry of managing our brain is available to everyone. If we enable people to build this circuitry, that is social justice in a nutshell. If we support people to build that circuitry, they can manage their brain's response. And in order to do that, we need to think about mental health in a different way. We are all on a spectrum of mental health at the level of the day, the week, and the month. It shifts about depending on those 4 psychosocial forces. We might come out of a very good weekend, healthy and thriving, and then we've got to Thursday and we're really struggling. We need to have this in our heads the entire time, for ourselves to keep tabs on where we are, for the colleagues around us, for the students in our school, and there are lots of behaviours that can move us back towards the green. What we want to create are Neuro Ninja resilient communities where everyone in that community knows how to rescue themselves inside their own brain every single day. One powerful, effective way that we can do that is investing very much in these 12 rocks of well-being. They come straight from neuroscience. Every single one of these will affect the way the brain connects and fires, will affect the kind of mind that is produced by a brain each day. I won't go into each of them. There are separate videos on the Neuro Ninja Hub that explain all of them, but we need to try and get as many of these in every day. Just think about yourself listening to this video. It's called Unfrazzle Your Head. One of the most powerful ways to unfrazzle your head is to make sure you get your 12 rocks of well-being in every day. Why are we so passionate about this? Why is this so important? What is the most powerful predictor of resilient brains and minds in children? That the adults around them work with those children, deploying those skills of resilience themselves. And it's not just about school staff. Children spend 15% of their lives with school staff. They spend 85% of their lives at home. That's why it's about parent partnership. Parents are experts on their children. That is our mission together, to build these 10 skills of executive function that sit in the top of the prefrontal cortex. That's what the Neuro Ninja strands are about: well-being and mind management and unleashing learning and managing behavior and relationships. It's building these skills in the top of the brain, and it literally is building them. They grow at the speed of a plant. It's about connectivity from the top of the brain all throughout the brain, so we can manage our responses and give the best version of ourselves each day. Resilience is about keeping the networks of the PFC, the DLPFC, the dorsal lateral PFC, at the top of the forehead, just underneath the forehead, to manage executive function. It needs to be strong and well connected across the brain. We need to support students, parents, carers and staff to move from the reactive circuitry at the bottom of the prefrontal cortex by unleashing skills of executive function. So the circuits at the top of the prefrontal cortex lead to more strategic, more thoughtful, more responsive, more empathetic, more inclusive decisions. Another key idea is that our brain activates 3 times more powerfully when it processes negative or unexpected information. So important that we know that. So important that we know that our brain has a worry system and it can overreact. So if there is a change in the world, if we're struggling and having a difficult experience, our amygdala will spot change and uncertainty and activate the bottom part of our prefrontal cortex. This is the part that cognitively distorts the future. Think of a child doing a past paper question in a lesson. It's in a lesson. They can ask their teacher, they can ask their friend, but their amygdala doesn't know that. They open the question paper, they can't do the first question, they start thinking, I can't do this question. If I can't do the question in the exam, I'm going to fail my exam. I won't get into college. That's a really stressful thought. Sets off the stress system. They're now feeling it. Their heart's pumping. Their stomach is clenching. They're breathing quickly. And then 5 or 6 seconds later, they think, hang on a second. I'm in a lesson. I can ask my teacher. I can ask my friends. The fact this question has cropped up now is actually good, because when it comes to the exam itself, I'll be able to answer the questions. All of that thinking is happening in the top circuits, and it soothes and calms the rest of the brain. There is, across the country, a silent set of mental rumination going on where students are in this area of their brain. They have souped up this area of their brain on social media. They've ended up in a space where they're finding it difficult to distract themselves from these highly negative thoughts. That is draining the blood from the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. That is reducing learning and memory and attention and those skills of executive function. Cognitive distortions are an outcome of an engaged worry system. Whenever our brain experiences uncertainty or change, the worry system comes on with highly charged negative predictions about what might go wrong if we don't take action. They're highly charged with strong emotions attached, so we do take action. You will recognize these thoughts because you have them every day. That email from a parent with that foreboding title, that message from your boss, all of these things will generate cognitive distortions initially, jumping to conclusions, catastrophizing. We all share a worry system, and these are the outcomes of a worry system. The most important thing for us to understand is whatever circuits we use the most get strongest. So if we've had a very difficult experience, if our parents have got divorced and it was acrimonious and tricky, we might have ended up strengthening these circuits, so we've become emotional and reactive, and we're really finding it difficult to concentrate and focus, and our behaviours perhaps all over the place. Slowly but surely, building this circuitry, we can begin to manage that place. It is also incredibly important to understand that stress and anxiety drain blood from the thinking parts of our brain, the parts that help us plan, focus our attention, make progress and respond to setbacks flexibly and responsibly. So stressed staff are not as effective. Stressed children don't learn as well. Stressed parents and carers don't either. But we need to support people to rescue themselves in their own brain. We need to help people build strength in the front of their brain to manage the rest of our brain. If we react to a problem, we generally end up with 2 problems. The problem that caused us to react, and the one we created when we reacted rather than responded. So the key takeaway from this first section is that we are all an emergent property of our brain and body. We are all able to remain aware, but we will all lose insight sometimes and get lost in the stories our brain tells itself about our behaviours and those behaviours of other people. And by understanding that we're emerging and retaining insight, we make better decisions about our own well-being, about our mind management, and in leading our schools. Welcome back to Unfrazzling Your Head. We're up to packet 2, all about building mental flexibility and bandwidth. This is a state we want to avoid. Frazzlement is the state of humanity in the 21st century. This is the stressed brain. This is a stressed brain that is finding it difficult to think. Frazzlement is the enemy of strategic thinking and positive responses. One of the reasons for frazzlement is just the sheer amount of information that a human brain has to deal with every day. We've created this problem for ourselves. We will experience in a single day perhaps 75 movies worth of data coming in through 37.5 gigabytes of information. That's about the same as amount of information that somebody experienced in a whole lifetime 300 years ago. We experience that in a day. No wonder we're feeling frazzled. But frazzlement is actually damaging the physical structure of our brain as well. It reduces memory formation, executive function, attention and focus, all of which reduce our ability to learn and remember and make positive progress. Frazzlement also amps up the negative biases in our brain. Frazzlement damages the physical structure of our brain. And we're talking about physical and mental health, and they are not separate. As we've seen, the body and brain generate the mind. We cannot separate mental and physical health. We need to think about this commodity, a commodity called mental flexibility, the ability to be responsive despite the complexity of incoming information, being able to flex our thinking and our response to the ever-changing circumstances we find ourselves in, and build effective plans to cope with that change in complexity and support other brains, student brains, to do the same. Our brain's ability to learn and remodel the world is actually physically located in a structure called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the site of mental flexibility. We need to look after the hippocampus. It helps us grow new memories through orchestrating constructs of neocortex circuitry, connecting it together. The hippocampus enables us to flex our mood and our emotions. It carries out neurogenesis. Neurogenesis is the growth of new neurons. We only discovered this about 5 or 6 years ago. Neurogenesis is the creation of 700 neurons a day in the hippocampus. They are all about flexibility. They are the site of mental flexibility. So if we think about something that damages mental flexibility, we need to talk about inflammation. Inflammation of the body causes the hippocampus to reduce neurogenesis. So that might be any reduction in well-being behaviors. For example, chronic bad sleep generates inflammation. Eating the wrong kind of food generates inflammation. Being chronically stressed generates inflammation. That inflammation crosses the blood-brain barrier and reduces neurogenesis, reduces mental flexibility, increases frazzlement. So, thinking about the whole brain of the whole person for the whole day, we need to do a whole bunch of things to reduce inflammation. For example, ultra-processed food, food with massive lists of laboratory created ingredients, food that actually tastes amazing like Pringles and Kettle Crisps, generates inflammation. That inflammation crosses the blood-brain barrier, reduces neurogenesis, increases anxiety and depression. Everything on the left of this seesaw builds positive brain health because it reduces inflammation. So that neurogenic niche is the font of flexibility, growth and responsiveness. Our 21st century life can powerfully damage this garden of the mind through blocking well-being behaviours, stopping us exercising, reducing our ability to sleep. We're not looking after ourselves. We're increasing inflammation. We're increasing frazzlement. Those new cells that grow in the hippocampus, they carry out memory formation. They help us learn. They help us flex in response to change. They help us regulate our emotions and our mood. And if we don't have hippocampal neurogenesis, we enter some horrible, distressing downward spiral. We have less flexibility and adaptability in our responses, which leads to lower mood, which leads to more anxiety, which leads to lower mood and depression. We have two default responses to difficult and challenging emotions, which can accelerate that downward spiral. We can be bottlers and hold emotion in, or we can be brooders. And what brooders do is overthink emotion, and it goes around and around. Bottling and brooding are two basic default responses. Emotional pain can increase the distress in the brain and reduce cognitive bandwidth. We all need to learn to be emotionally agile. This is rock 6 of the 12 rocks of wellbeing, Neuro Ninja skill 2, which is about managing emotions. We need to show up, notice, accept, and move on from our emotions. Why do we need to do this? Why is this important? Because emotional pain is lodged physically in the brain, in the same part of the brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, that measures physical pain. Physical and emotional pain, as far as the brain are concerned, are the same thing. Imagine trying to do a maths test with toothache. Imagine trying to do a maths test with mum and dad arguing at home. Emotional pain slows down communication between areas in the brain, reduces our ability to build mental flexibility, makes us much more reactive, plunges us into low emotional spaces. We need to process our emotions every day, and we need to develop these 3 nested skills of emotional regulation, as important as literacy and numeracy in terms of being successful in life. Emotional agility, the awareness that we are living on a shifting emotion ocean every day, that our body and brain generate emotions. The body and brain using the information coming in from the nerves together to generate an emotional palette. We need to be emotionally granular, which basically means begin to name emotions and link them to events in our lives. If the top of our brain, those same circuits of executive function, can explain what's happening, we can begin to process our experiences. So we should practice emotional hygiene every day. We shower and brush our teeth every day. We need to practice emotional or psychological hygiene, which looks like this. What happened to me today? How did I feel? What emotions were involved? If we do these things, we begin to help our brain process its emotional experiences, and we don't end up with emotional pain lodged in that anterior cingulate cortex. We begin to tidy up the ongoing mess that emotions can create in our brain by noticing, accepting, and sharing with care our emotional experiences. So you could use a tracker like this. You could support students to use a tracker like this. In our Neuro Ninja schools, we support the whole community to understand the importance of emotional hygiene, to cognitive bandwidth, to mental flexibility, to learning and progress. If you're suffering from emotional pain, you are not having the full availability of cognitive bandwidth in your brain. You're really struggling. Welcome back to Unfrazzling Your Head from Action Your Potential, Mind Management for School Leaders. We're now looking at unmanaged stress as a barrier to growth. And just to introduce you to 2 nervous systems, we're living inside 2 nervous systems. The autonomic nervous system is divided into 2 branches. The react nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, and the response parasympathetic nervous system. And we need to help students understand this and parents understand this. The react nervous system, which generates full-on stress, fight, flight, freeze when it's fully activated, is important. It's not a bad nervous system. It gets us ready for action. It helps us perform in a play in a match, answer questions in class, do a test. We need it to deal with life. It is about action in the world. It elicits and releases more energy. It might help and protect us. It might help us run away. But it is not a bad nervous system. But when it comes on, we have symptoms. We have lots of whirling thoughts. We might have a dry mouth. We have tummy ache and butterflies. These symptoms can be strong, particularly if we're about to do something we've never done before, like go on a residential or go from primary school to secondary school. Any really strong new experience can cause a very powerful react nervous system response. Think about year 6 going to secondary school. At the end of the summer holidays, their brain and body get ready by releasing lots of adrenaline, lots of cortisol, getting us ready to cope with the new experience. But at this point, the brain doesn't know what that new experience entails. So it releases too much energy, because it's better to have too much than too little. So we experience uncomfortable symptoms of activation, really bad stomach butterflies, really fast heartbeat, very dry mouth. We might feel quite wobbly. We might think, I don't want to do this. And then we go to school, we have the experience, and we calm down afterwards. And over several weeks, we get to a space by the beginning of October where actually school is maybe not exciting anymore, maybe not nervy anymore, maybe just a bit boring. a bit normal. The brain has cut the energy budget to match it. The distressing thing happens if we don't do the thing. If we don't go to school, those symptoms remain. We stay in that uncomfortable space. We need to support students to understand that the ticket to get to the next stage of life, the key that unlocks the door, are those feelings of uncomfortableness. We can't do new things without feeling a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit nervous. We've got to manage those experiences. And we can support students to understand that they can calm their system down using positive thoughts and planning, and they can use their body to calm their system down as well. We can use the 12 rocks and an acronym called GLADDEN, which is to think of one thing we're grateful for, one thing we learned, one thing we achieved, one thing that delighted us, one positive emotion and one new experience. We can calm down the system. We can turn down the strength of those symptoms by using self-regulation. We need to teach skills to parents around positive coping strategies rather than maladaptive reactions. We need to teach children these skills as well, and staff these skills, so everyone is talking around that brain in the same way, enabling and empowering rather than disabling and disempowering. We need to help people build these positive coping strategies and understand that we all, under situations of high stress, can develop sets of maladaptive reactions and how we should manage those maladaptive reactions. Welcome back to Unfrazzling Your Head. We're in the last packet now. It's all about building resilient learning communities. So we've looked at mental flexibility, we've looked at well-being, we've looked at frazzlement, we've looked at the fact that we're an emergent property of our body and brains. The message from neuroscience is clear for the entire school community. We want to build resilient learners. We are all shaping our brains every day by those 4 psychosocial forces. And I just want to introduce this other concept, this concept of metastability. Brains are 86 billion neurons, 300 trillion connections. There are many ways that they can settle into firing patterns. Those firing patterns are obviously determined by both genetics and the incredible importance of environment, particularly nurture. But whatever firing patterns we fall into, they can be positive, they can be negative. They don't necessarily have to be positive. There are many states the brain can fall into. Metastability describes a state of balance that emerges from a dynamic and fast-moving system. Brains are chaotic, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way. Brains follow the maths of chaos. They are sensitively dependent on initial conditions. Whatever brain circuits are firing create patterns across the brain. Our sense of ourselves, as we looked at earlier, is an emergent property. At every level across the brain, there's a balance of communication and coordination, and we emerge, and our brain's metastable states are sensitive to initial conditions. So we're never exactly the same, but building those metastable states over time through neuroplasticity, through the firing of continually the same circuits, we can settle into metastable states. They can be positive, they can be negative, they can be short-lived like a mood, or they can be longer-lived like aspects of our personality. And our personality emerges from the repeat interactions of specific biological wiring with the social and psychological forces around us, the quality of our relationships with our caregivers, how we learn or don't learn to regulate ourselves, the physical state of our biological system, the ongoing habits and habitual patterns of thinking, reacting and responding that occur in our brain. Our brain generates our mind like a projector throwing up an image, and our brain is a learning machine. It looks for patterns perpetually in the environment and begins to build models of the world from similarities it finds in the incoming data. That process of decoding the world begins with physical phenomena like light and sound, and then continues through psychological and social phenomena. And because the psychological and social world never settles down, because it's always complex and changing, that's why the PFC at the front of the brain is neurally plastic. That's why cultural information like writing and reading, only invented 10,000 years ago, has stamped its imprint on the brain. And this is where the community comes in. The patterns in someone else's brain can help or hinder changes in our own brain. The patterns in someone else's brain could be boundaries or fences preventing our brain moving from one difficult metastable state to perhaps a less difficult metastable state. So we need to be thinking about people in our lives in categories. Are they drains? Are they radiators? We need to support and surround children with radiators. We need to support parents to understand the importance of the firing pattern in their own brain and the way it might impact on the firing pattern in their child's brain. We emerge from the firing patterns of our brain as a globally connected matrix, and every day those around us affect the patterns that are occurring in our own brain. That can create both opportunities and barriers to change, growth and development. These thoughts, these processes, these ways of responding help us remain in that top circuitry, in the executive function circuits at the bottom of the brain. Everything below that insight line takes us into metastable states of difficulty and low mood and overthinking and rumination, where we've got less optimistic thoughts, where we see opportunities as threats perhaps. So just return to those psychosocial forces. We want to be in a balanced brain where we've got good habits, we're in relationships that are supportive and nurturing, we're thinking about ourselves in a positive developmental way, we're not responding to mistakes and setbacks by overreacting. We're understanding that mistakes and setbacks are part of the learning and process of growth. And we've got goals that drive us forward. If we lose one of those things, we've got not great habits. Relationships aren't great with other people. Relationships with ourselves aren't great. And we don't have any goals as a result. We lose that insight. We can help people to think about those four psychosocial forces in their lives. How are their habits? Are they positive? How are their relationships? Are they positive? How do they think about themselves? Do they think positively about themselves? Do they think about themselves in a balanced way? What goals do they have driving them forward? If we're negative on some of these things, we're going to find it more difficult to live in a balanced brain. We could lose insight for a day. We could get lost in the weather of a brain. We could get stuck in the mist. We could lose insight for a week. We could lose insight upsettingly for a lifetime. There's no guarantee that we could flip our metastable state because the brain's generating us and we think we're unchanging. We may not ever change our behaviours. We might end up stuck. But if the parent of the child is a neuroninja and the child themselves is a neuroninja, we're securing the future because we're enabling people to rescue themselves inside their brain. And if the child and parent are part of a neuroninja community, that secures the future for the whole community. And school leaders are neuroninjas and staff are neuroninjas too. And imagine a world where everyone understood their brains, able to apply those four psychosocial forces and those metacognitive skills. If the parent changes their metastable state, the way they interact with their child, it creates the opportunity for the child's brain to move into a new pattern. We're teaching parents this. That is our mission, to teach parents this information, to teach children this information. The journey from one metastable state to another is almost always turbulent and discombobulating because the brain is moving from one firing pattern to another. In terms of your well-being, and you're listening to this before December 23, you can access any of these. If you're listening to this after December 23, you can access all of these on the NeuroNinja Hub. 10-15 minute bursts of information that will inspire you, hopefully, to take forward the journey to become a NeuroNinja at the level of the individual, at the level of students in your school, at the level of your whole community. So to finish off, there are 4 key takeaways from these videos. First of all, to build productivity, mental and physical health and personal effectiveness every day, we need to remember always that we're an emergent property of our body and brain, and 50% of how we feel each day is down to what we've done in the previous 24 hours. That high mental flexibility and cognitive bandwidth secures excellence, and well-being and mind management are as much a part of excellence as anything to do with learning and memory is. Unmanaged stress is the enemy of bandwidth and mental flexibility. People need to apply bespoke tools to defend mental flexibility every day, those positive coping strategies we talked about, and that building resilience across a school should be the key focus of parental partnership, and we provide materials and resources to do that. If we don't do that, we're missing a trick. If we don't do that, we're not accessing 85% of that young person's experience. We're not supporting families who are the experts in their children to grow and develop their children in perpetuity. Thanks for listening.